Have you ever wondered what is the spiritual aspect of weight loss? Well, that's what I want to talk about in this video. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I subtitled my channel, Becoming Warrior Princesses of the Spirit. And the reason that I say that is because there's so much that we put up with in our lives that we should be more than conquerors over. And it's going to take a fight, and it's going to take putting on our armor, and it's going to take yielding the sword, learning how to use it, how to swing it. And in today's video, I want to talk more about the spiritual aspect of weight loss, and really this can start applying to any other area of our lives. That there are some things that we develop strongholds in our lives, and the enemy really has jurisdiction, so to speak, over that area in our lives. And the Lord is just not about it. He wants us to destroy that, and He has given us the power and the ability to do that. One of the first verses that I wanted to share is in 2 Corinthians 10. He says in verses 3 and 4, "For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds." And this is exactly what I'm talking about, becoming a warrior princess of the Spirit. It's learning how to fight and demolish these things, and this happens to be one of those areas in our lives, right? I wanted to read you a little bit of these commentary notes that talk about this stronghold idea, because it's easy to read these verses that we become super familiar with over time, and we don't really understand what they mean. That has been my really big challenge lately, is if I don't really get what this means, which is most of the time, to really dig in and get some commentaries and look at what does this actually say from someone who studied much more in depth than I ever have. So this commentary is by Barnes Notes on the Bible, and it's specifically on 2 Corinthians 10:4, which is the one that says, "For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power for destroying strongholds." So he says, strongholds in the original term meant a strong fortification. He says, "It is here beautifully denoted the various obstacles resembling a fortress which exist and which are designed and adapted to oppose the truth and the triumph of Christ's cause." He goes on to say, "The sin of the heart are fortified by long indulgence and by the hold which they have on the soul. Warfare is to be waged against every strongly fortified place of error and sin. These strong fortifications of error are to be battered down and laid in ruins by our spiritual weapons." I like that it says in these words, they are fortified by long indulgence and by the hold which they have on the soul. And that is what I began to realize about my eating and my weight, was over this period of long indulgence in using food in an emotional way as comfort, and basically because I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I didn't want to exercise self-control. I wanted to make myself have the feeling that the food was giving me. I created, or allowed to be created, this stronghold in my life. The first thing that we have to do is be brave enough, and that really is what it's going to take, is some courage and boldness to look at these areas in our lives and say, I see that I have lost control over this, because I can control it temporarily in my flesh, have some kind of results, but in the end, I always gain it back, and that's where the problem lies. Because if it's a stronghold, something is not working correctly in our freedom, in our beliefs, and we have to destroy it. So admitting, number one, that we are out of control in this area. The second thing was just basically confessing my need for the Lord in this area. So it kind of goes back to the order of coming to the Lord in the first place. admitting we're sinners, and then confessing our sins. Admitting that I have no control in this area, or very little control. And secondly, just telling the Lord that I'm sorry, that I don't know how to fix myself. So often, I believe we think we are the ones that have to fix ourselves. I know I believed that for a long time, and it's exhausting because we know we know what we can do, and it doesn't last very long. But the confession is just basically saying, I see this and I need your help. I learned the hard way that grace is for saving us, but grace is also for changing us. And what we have to do is confess our need for the Lord. Sometimes it has to happen over and over daily. I still have to do it every single day because I know within my own strength, I'm not going to be able to do it. So that's the second thing to kind of look at. The third thing, that it could be part of the mental processes, or it could be part of the spiritual, because we we want to separate ourselves into different sections, but we're one being, and so they all kind of mesh together. But is forgiveness. And for me, I had to realize that it was because of unforgiveness in my heart over pains that had happened in my childhood and adolescence, both from my family members and just from society, that I kept myself back from addressing the stronghold because it hurt too bad. And of course we know that when we hold on to unforgiveness, it is like being chained to that person or to that hurt and being constantly hurt by it over and over again. I had come to believe growing up that I was only as valuable as what I weighed. And I knew that wasn't true. And so I think I began to rebel in some ways. Like, I want to be loved for who I am and not how much I weigh. So I'm going to just be as big as I want to be and eat what I want anytime I want. There was a judgmental aspect of this, which I'm going to talk about in the next video, where I had to address how I was judging myself, how I perceived others judging me, and learning to let that go. But as far as forgiveness, I had to, first of all, forgive myself for giving up too easily, because that was easy for me to label myself a failure. For my mom and the things that I had felt that she had hurt me through my weight issues and all of that, I just had to begin looking at what it was that I needed to seek forgiveness for in myself, for others, the things that I was not letting go, even things that I thought I had addressed, but really I hadn't addressed, things that had hurt me. Because if you've carried extra weight for a long time, it's very painful because we wear it in public. And it's easy to judge. It's easy to look at and point at or, see, basically. And there's a lot of things that need to be addressed and forgiven in that. And I don't believe we can move forward with a healing perspective until we deal with that unforgiveness in our hearts, whether it's towards specific people groups, things that we're just not facing in our hearts, that we will not be able to move forward into breaking down the strongholds until we can forgive that and those things. Lastly, what I mentioned before about needing God and confessing our need for Him is this idea of I needed Him. I needed to know that He cared about this area in my life. I think for me, and maybe for you, I convinced myself that God doesn't care about this. It was all up to me. It was all up to me to figure it out. But that wasn't true. He cared about it because it hurt me. And so I had to invite Him into it and say, this is painful for me, and I don't understand it. Will you please help me understand why I have this root, and will you please help me to pull it out? When we ask God to address roots in our lives, it's only for the warrior heart that can handle that. And you know that you have that warrior heart somewhere deep inside of you, the one that keeps getting back up and has a fighter in her. And that is who it's going to have to be. That person has to rise up inside of you to say, I'm not going to be afraid of this anymore. I'm not going to be afraid of my failure. I am not going to be afraid of trying again and failing again, or looking like an idiot, or whatever it is that we're fearing. To be able to say, with God's help, this is something that I am so tired of, and whatever you require of me, I want to press in, but I know it's going to have to be through you alone. And just that dependence on Him to bring the freedom, because we've tried to strong arm it ourselves for years, and it hasn't helped. It hasn't changed us. It just keeps coming back over and over again. The key is dependence. I'm convinced that I need Him again to fill me up the next day with self-control, with the discipline that I need in order to accomplish these things. Because without that, I know I will go back to my regular way of being. He wants to renew our minds, but we have to allow the process of that to take place by being engaged in it. We can't just be a backseat participant and we're like, just make it happen for us. He's going to require us to be involved, to fight, to be engaged. We cannot disengage from this and think we will have long-term victory. It is not going to happen, because the minute we disengage, the minute we're going backwards. I shared a post on Instagram yesterday that it would be so silly of us to see our phone is dead and be like, well, that doesn't work. We would know that we need to plug it in for all the things that our phones are doing all day long and how often we're checking them, whether that's good or bad. We know that eventually the battery's gonna die, and we don't think that it's pointless once it does die. We know we just recharge it and then it works again. And that is what has to be in us spiritually in regards to any area of our life, but especially areas we've been weak in for a long time. To be like, again, every single day, I need you to fill me. I need you to give me the power. I need you to remind me. I need you to strengthen me. To be that desperate for Him. That is the thing that I realized was one factor that was really missing in my approach to weight loss. I was unwilling, even though I love the Lord, to invite Him into that area. So thank you so much again for watching. This is a really tough topic, and I am so thankful that you're here and willing to hear me share on this. And again, I'm not where I want to be. I'm a fellow journeyer with you, constantly needing Jesus' supply, just like you. And if there's any way I can help or encourage or support you, I would be so glad to do that. Thank you so much for being here, and be sure to subscribe and check me out on Instagram to see what else is happening around what we've got going on. There's a lot of good stuff going on these days. So thank you for being here, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye.